All right, we're going to start talking about solving quadratic functions, and we're going to do so by first reviewing how to solve a linear equation. And so this says x minus 3 equals 0. So just remember that you want to get the x by itself. In order to do that, you kick the 3 to the other side by doing the inverse. So add 3 to both sides, you get x equals 3. We'll do the same thing here. We'll solve this one and do the inverse. So inverse of a positive is a negative. So minus 2 on both sides, and I get x equals negative 2. And then number 3, we have an extra step here. So we're solving for the x. We subtract 5 on both sides. I get 2x equals negative 5. But then I have something in front of the x, so I divide it away. And I get x equals negative 5 over 2. And then on number 4, box in your variable, add 1 to both sides. And I get 4x equals 1, and we divide by 4, which means x equals 1/4. And we're going to need to use this information for what we're going to do here in a few minutes. So this property is what we need, the zero product property. It says that if a times b equals 0, then either a equals 0 or b equals 0. So basically it's saying that if you are multiplying two things together, and you get an answer of 0, then one of those things had to be 0. So if I look at number 5, x minus 3 times x plus 5, I have two things. I have x minus 3 and I have x plus 5. And if I say that they equal 0, then that means either x minus 3 equals 0 or x plus 5 equals 0. And so to figure out what number would make this equal 0, we just solve it. So x minus 3, we add 3 to both sides, and I get x equals 3. And here we subtract 5 on both sides, and I get x equals negative 5. And what we're talking about are the zeros. So we're looking for the x-intercepts, or zeros, of the function. And if I were to graph this equation, I would see that it crosses the x at 3 and negative 5. And so I'm going to show you that real quick. Go to a graph page. You can just watch right now. I'm going to type in the question, x minus 3 times x plus 5. And here we can see that it crosses at 3 and it crosses at negative 5. Those are my zeros. We're going to do the same thing for number 6. I have 2x plus 1 times 5x minus 4. And if the whole equation equals 0, then that means either 2x plus 1 equals 0 or 5x minus 4 equals 0. And so we're going to solve these to see what the x value would be. Subtract 1 on both sides, I get 2x equals negative 1. And then divide by 2, so I get x equals negative 1/2. Over here, I have 5x equals, we're going to add 4 to both sides. And then we're going to divide by 5, so I get 4/5. And if I were to graph this one, I would see that they also crossed the x at negative 1/2 and 4/5. So let's go graph it. Control Doc, graph page. 2x plus 1 times 5x minus 4. And here it looks like it's about 4/5. It looks like it's negative 1/2. Just remember that you can press menu 5-1. And you can trace your graph to find your 0. So 0.8 is 4/5. And then negative 1/2 is negative 0.5. So there it goes, it matches up. Now, what happens when you have a quadratic function that's not already in factored form? Okay. Then you would actually have to factor it. So here we're going to draw the x. First term times last term. Negative 5 times positive 4 is negative 20x squared. Bring the 8x down. So I'm looking for factors of negative 20 that add to 8, which are 2 and 10, and actually negative 2 and positive 10. So negative 2 times 10 is negative 20, and then if you add negative 2 and 10, you get positive 8. Then remember, we divide by the first term, so 4x squared, and then we simplify. So divide by 2 on both sides, I get 5 over 2x. Here I can also divide by 2, and I get negative 1 over 2x. And then move the bottom to the front. So I get 2x minus 1 times 2x plus 5. And what we're going to do is we're going to replace this trinomial with these two sets of parentheses. So 2x minus 1 times 2x plus 5 equals 0. And if I set it equal to 0, then that means either this side or this side equals 0. So we're going to keep solving. 2x minus 1 equals 0, which means we're solving this, add 1 to both sides, and then divide by 2, so I get 1/2. Or I have 2x plus 5 equals 0. So minus 5 on both sides, I get 2x equals negative 5. Divide by 2, and I get negative 5 over 2. So that means the zeros are 1/2, 0, and negative 5 over 2, 0. And again, we can use our calculator just to double check. So if I go to a graph page and I type in the original question, 4x squared plus 8x minus 5, I'm looking for where it equals 0, and it equals 0 along the x-axis. And if I press menu 5-1 and I look, there's 1/2. Then if I go to the other side, I get negative 2.5, which is my negative 5 over 2. Okay, so right now the calculator is a way for us to check our answer. Let's keep going. I got one more practice question. So I want to factor it and find the zeros. So draw your x, first term, times last term, 60x squared. Bring the middle to the bottom. So I want factors of 60 that add to 16. So that would be 6x and 10x. And when we divide by the first term, and we simplify, both these divide by 2, so I get 5 over 2x. And here I can divide by 2, and I get 3 over 2x. And then move the bottom to the front. So I get 2x plus 3 and 2x minus 5. So now I rewrite it, and I say that this equals 0. Which means that either this side or this side equals 0. So 2x plus 3 equals 0, which means 2x equals negative 3, or x equals negative 3 over 2. Or 2x minus 5 equals 0, so 2x equals 5, or x equals 5 over 2. So my zeros are negative 3 over 2, comma 0, and 5 over 2, comma 0. Okay. So this is the algebraic way to find your zeros. So we're factoring to find the zeros. Now there's one more piece I want to show you. If I were to type in number 8, which I already have typed in, No, that's not number 8. That's number 7. Let's go type in number 8. So I have 4x squared plus 16x plus 15. And I know that my zeros are negative 3 over 2. Oh, sorry. I just noticed and that I put a minus here and I should not have. So this should be plus, which means this should be plus, and this should be plus, that should be minus. Okay? Let's keep going now. If I look at my graph, my zeros are negative 3 over 2, which is right here, and negative 5 over 2 right here. If I push tab, though, and I type in 2x plus 3, which was one of the factors, I want you to notice that it crosses at the 0. So the line crosses at the 0. So when you solve it, you get the 0, but the line crosses at the 0. So if I push tab and I type in the other one, 2x plus 5, I also see that it crosses at the other 0. So if you are struggling with factoring, which is what your quiz was over last week, then I want you to grab this paper and I want you to say that what are linear factors of a quadratic? What you are looking for is the line that crosses the quadratic at the x-intercept. Okay? And just to make sure that you are on the same page, because I want you to review factoring by using the calculator, and then on the back of this page you're going to try practicing solving by factoring. So we're going to go do number 1 together. So I'm going to go to a new graph page and type in 4x squared plus 23x minus 72. And so I have 2 zeros here and here. And now you know a couple things. If you were to solve each of your answer choices for 0, so if I solve these for 0, you could figure out where it crosses. Or you can press tab and you can type in 4x plus 9 doesn't cross at the 0. X minus 8 does not cross at the 0. 4x minus 9, well, there we go, crosses at the 0. And if I were to type in letter D, x plus 9 does not cross at the 0. So I'm looking, I can find my zeros by solving for 0, or I can use my calculator to look for that factor that crosses. So here my answer was 4x minus 9. Okay?